What a delight it is to be here in the home of the AFL Premiers. John Olsen said, "Are you still celebrating?" Yeah. This will go on for some time, I can assure you. It is a delight to be here, and I acknowledge the many distinguished guests, including Senator Linda Reynolds and Bill Marmion, member for Nedlands, and the Governor, of course, and the Vice-Chancellor, and the speakers who are taking part in this In the Zone conference. And this is such an important conference because we gather to discuss the developments in what is arguably the most dynamic time zone in the world, and take this opportunity to look at what more Perth can do to take advantage of our exquisite location within this time zone. We are, of course, Australia's Indian Ocean capital city. Now, the dynamism of this time zone is driven by a number of factors, not least being the extraordinary economic development that has reshaped our region and the world in China, India, Southeast Asian nations, building on the development, economic and social development in Japan, South Korea and Taiwan in past decades. And this extraordinary change, where the economic weight is moving from west to east, away from the US and Europe to our region, means there's been a massive increase in demand for resources and energy, goods and services, as hundreds of millions of people have been lifted out of poverty, as living standards have increased, as consumer and middle classes are on the rise. And Western Australia has played a vital role in fulfilling that demand. But the full implications of this development in our part of the world are yet to be realised. A number of nations are not yet fully developed, and of course there are nations seeking to avoid the middle income trap. The second trend, related to the first, is the technological advancements that are disrupting the way we live, the way we work, the way we travel and engage on a scale and pace unprecedented in human history. And this will only accelerate with the advent of big data, with massive embrace of technology, this fourth industrial revolution, the networking of global devices, the huge processing power, artificial intelligence, robotics, 3D printing, this instantaneous sharing of knowledge and experiences. And this gives us an opportunity to improve the quality of life, the standards of living throughout our region. Just take the smartphone that popped up just before the first of these conferences put on by the Perth USAsia Centre. The smartphone, with its permanent connectivity, is an outreach of a supercomputer. There are millions of apps that are available to enhance the operations of a smartphone, and this will lead to a dramatic increase in a standard of living, just in terms of the gains through convenience and safety and efficiency. And with those apps enhancing the smartphone, we're only limited by our imagination and the dexterity of our fingers. As Australia's Foreign Minister for 5 years, I had the opportunity to develop a really deep interest in the use of technology and how technological developments could transform lives. We set up what we called the Innovation Exchange, an ideas hub within the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, to tackle the seemingly intractable development challenges in the Indo-Pacific region. We brought together some of the brightest, most creative, innovative thinkers in the department, across the public service and from the private sector. And we presented them with challenges and said, take risks, think differently, come up with ideas, start with a blank piece of paper. Now, this is not what governments normally do, being so risk averse, but we charged the Innovation Exchange with the responsibility of coming up with new ideas, and they did. But very early on in the life of the Innovation Exchange, we saw the embrace of technology as being at the heart of our development solutions, whether it was new ways to deliver pharmaceuticals into remote regions, or the use of drones in disaster relief, or new energy solutions for Pacific Islands. And then we started partnering with technology companies like Atlassian and Google. And then we became involved in global hackathons and ideas challenges with organisations like X Prize Foundation. And through the Innovation Exchange, we have transformed the way Australia sees our role as the provider of development assistance. It's targeted, it's focused, and it embraces technology. And one company, Planet Labs, staffed by former NASA experts and a few Australians as well, is deploying microsatellites. It's based in the Bay Area in the US, in San Francisco. And these microsatellites are the size of a shoebox, and the aim is to continuously photograph the Earth from space. And the data that will be available through this process is just extraordinary. Being able to see the changes in soil types and drought areas, and how a natural disaster impacts on particular regions. So when you think about autonomous vehicle development, that will absolutely revolutionise transport systems in this country. And I'm glad Megan Clark mentioned Rio Tinto. I visited that centre at Perth Airport. It's just extraordinary to think that the driverless trains are supervised from a centre thousands of kilometres away from the site. It involves the deploying of hundreds of rail trucks hauling thousands of tonnes of iron ore, and all linked through satellites. And the mining sector is embracing this technology. It will transform mining operations and mining practices in Australia. But it also gives rise to many space-based technologies. The demand is there. And you think of GPS, Global Positioning System, which is ubiquitous and absolutely vital for monitoring our transport at so many levels. And the use of satellites, which is already enhancing land management practices, remote area internet services, managing supply chains. It is so exciting to think of the opportunities ahead. And I was delighted to listen to Megan's speech about the Australian Space Agency. This was a commitment by the coalition government to develop Australia's capability. And while we don't have the domestic launch capacity at present, listening to Megan makes me believe that we will have that capacity very soon. But already we have mature and emerging technologies that will underpin a space industry in this state, in this country. One of the technologies that I was privileged to see in demonstration was at Mount Stromlo near Canberra recently. And EOS, Electro-Optic Systems, run by Ben Green, is utilising world-leading laser technology in a way that will transform one of the big challenges of the global space industry. They are focused on cleaning up space junk, and using laser technology, they are able to target the debris that is currently out there in orbit. And I was reading up on this. It's extraordinary how much is actually out there. We're talking about pieces of satellites and rocket bodies and boosters and the like. But when, for example, China decided to use a weather satellite for target practice for one of its missiles and connected, the satellite shattered. And this is happening time and time again. So the EOS technology tracks pieces of debris and then allows the operators of the satellites to manoeuvre their satellites out of the way into a different orbit and back again to avoid a collision that could, of course, cost billions of dollars, given that the Australian Space Agency estimates that the space industry is already valued at something like $475 billion, 25% of that government and 75% of it private sector. There is a lot of money and very expensive equipment already in space. But satellites have limited fuel. So EOS is currently working out how they can come up with a technology that avoids having the satellite move in and out of these manoeuvres, avoiding the space debris. And they're using plasma beams that can track a speck of space junk and push it into another orbit. So the satellite keeps on its orbit, but they push the junk out. And this is the kind of technology that's being developed in Australia that the international space community is very excited about, and the sort of work that I believe our new space agency will foster, encourage, and inspire. Already, our bright, innovative, creative scientists and researchers and astronomers are coming up with technologies that are part of the global supply chain in space technologies. I think that Western Australia is already on the map because of the Square Kilometre Array. That would have to be the most exciting space-related science project that one could imagine. It will exponentially increase our understanding of deep space and the universe. I was the Minister for Science in 2006-2007 when we launched our bid to host the Square Kilometre Array. And I recall at the time being told that it will be like winning the Olympics, but every year forever. So we found the money to support the bid, and competition was fierce. There were many countries seeking to host the Square Kilometre Array because they understood the enormous value, the transformative value of hosting the Square Kilometre Array. Well, two bids were compelling, South Africa and Australia, and together with New Zealand and a number of other countries, we won the right to host the Square Kilometre Array. And having visited the site, it is just extraordinary to see how we will be building the world's largest radio telescope with hundreds of radio antennas across our vast noise-free landscape. And The square kilometre array will also mean that a supercomputing centre will be built here in Perth. But the square kilometre array, as others have indicated, will enable astronomers to monitor the skies in an unprecedented way, thousands of times faster than any current system enables us to do. And the image resolution will be 50 times greater than the Hubble Space Telescope. This is revolutionary, and it's happening right here in Western Australia. And in fact, Megan, you can assure me if this is correct or not, but Rio told me when I was out at the centre that when the supercomputer centre is established and when we have the capacity to embrace big data, Rio could operate its worldwide locations and sites from one centre in Perth. That's really exciting. What we're facing at present in Western Australia is a real opportunity to tap into this frontier. The UWA ARC Centre of Excellence for Gravitational Wave Discovery is another example. Space-related, it will make a big difference to our understanding of space and the opportunities that it presents. I think that this current time is probably as exciting as the space race of the 1950s and the 1960s, which culminated in Neil Armstrong's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. And we all remember where we were, if you're of a particular age, where you were at that moment. But when you think of the NASA rovers on Mars, the space probes, wanting to study Jupiter, the Japanese example of their probe that has got small space vehicles on asteroids and bringing samples back. Yeah, good luck with Biosecurity Australia, bringing samples back. It really is a terribly exciting time for us all. And when you think that there are already discussions about how we will mine the key minerals that exist on the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, if we're talking about mining in space, well, where's the expertise in terms of mining but here in Western Australia? Last November, the Coalition Government published a foreign policy white paper. And this was the first review of foreign policy and our international engagement in about 14 years. It was timely because we are facing such extraordinary challenges. The technological development of which I spoke, the realignment of great powers, probably the greatest we've seen since the end of the Cold War, the mass movement of people on a scale that we've not seen since the Second World War, the biological and chemical and nuclear weapons proliferation, the rise of protectionism and nationalism, and these challenges that are facing us. So this white paper looked at putting together a framework that would reflect our values, our interests and priorities. And one of the chapters was focused on space, because that is the new frontier, maybe the final frontier. But it's somewhere where Australia must have its voice heard. You see, we are supporters of the international rules-based order. We promote, defend, protect that framework of conventions and treaties underpinned by international law that has evolved over the last 70 years and governs how nations behave and towards each other. That international rules-based order is under strain. In many instances, it's being openly challenged by nations. But we will need an international rules-based order to govern behaviour in space. And Australia must be a leading voice, an advocate, a champion to ensure that nations behave in space as our expectations are on Earth. This is no simple challenge. This will be an extraordinary effort on the part of all nations on the Earth. And Australia is a significant voice in world affairs. Australia is respected as an open, liberal democracy, committed to freedoms and the rule of law and democratic institutions. We're an open, export-oriented market economy. We sell high-quality goods and services around the world. We are 53rd in terms of population, but we are the 13th largest economy in the world, and we've set a world record, 27 consecutive years of uninterrupted economic growth. So Australia's voice matters, and I think that we have an obligation, indeed a responsibility, to take part in the debates, the discussions and the development of a rules-based order that applies in space. Here in Western Australia, we're exquisitely positioned to take advantage of the opportunities that our fledgling space industry offers. Western Australians are entrepreneurial, we embrace creativity, innovation, we have first-class universities, and we know that taking risks can lead to great economic and social outcomes. That's what we do. So I'm delighted that In the Zone is focused on space, because it surely is an exciting future. And I have no doubt that Australia's very best days lie ahead of us if we are able to embrace this exciting new future.